Good morning. Today we are going over chapter 8 and 9 in hunter safety, and these are our last two chapters, and then we are going to take our test on Monday, Tuesday. So you can only take the test if you're in person because it's like a state test. So for you to be able to get your license, I have to see you in person to take it. So hopefully when we come back, maybe we can schedule for a Wednesday for us to take it. But to supplement our grades for the test for remote students, I will upload a separate test for you so that you will still have a grade for that test, if that makes sense. Okay. So, chapter 8 is on preparation and survival skills. So, importance of planning and prepping. Hunting is a safe sport, but it does involve a certain amount of risk because we're using firearms, right? But there's also all kinds of incidences that can happen on a trip outdoors. So, the rougher the terrain, especially when it's unfamiliar terrain, the greater the chance of accidents. So to plan properly, there are 4 areas when preparing for a hunt. The first one is to be ready. To minimize problems, it's essential that you plan carefully for the hunt. Responsible hunters anticipate potential problems and make plans to deal with them. So things to consider when you're planning and being ready are terrain, location, weather, the game that you're hunting, is it dangerous, like bears or something, and then the potential for forest fires. Number 2 is to know your location. So learn as much as you can about your chosen hunting area before you arrive. So get like a map and then familiarize yourself with the terrain. If it's within a convenient drive, it's a good idea to visit the area in the off season. 3, prepare for safety. So you need to assess your physical condition and equipment and refresh your memory of hunting and firearm safety rules and review the rules with your hunting partners. And then tell others. So prepare a hunting plan that tells where and whom you are hunting and when you expect to return. You need to give specific directions on your route to your destination and any alternate destinations. Leave the plan with a family member or friend and do not deviate from that hunting plan without notifying someone. When you're hunting with a group, each person should discuss their route plan. So just to hone in on the fact that you need a hunting plan tells where and with whom you intend to hunt with and when you expect to return. It also should contain specific directions on your route to your destination and any alternate destination you may have if bad weather changes. So I think I have like a little picture of a safety plan here. Let's see. Yeah, right there is a picture of a hunting plan. Okay. Physical conditioning. So hunting often demands more physical exertion than you're accustomed to. So conditions may hamper your physical ability to perform safely and responsibly while hunting include allergies, asthma, a heart condition, excess weight, poor physical conditioning. Your mental condition impacts your performance as well, so we need to make sure that we're good in that area. Okay, clothing. So clothing may affect your ability to perform safely and responsibly. Select clothing based on the weather you expect while you're prepared, but being prepared for the worst. So most of the time when we're hunting, it's super cold, right? So we need to make sure that we are prepared for that. In warm weather, wear a hat and light clothing that covers as much of your skin as possible to prevent heat exhaustion and sunburn. Cold weather conditions call for clothing that is worn in layers. So layers offers superior insulation. Also, as weather warms up, you can shed a layer at a time to stay comfortable. Layers should include a vapor transmission layer, materials such as polypropylene worn next to the body. It should release moisture from the skin while retaining warmth. An insulating layer, weightier or bulkier, it should hold warm air around you. And then a protective layer available in various weights and materials according to conditions, and it should provide the inner layers, protect the inner layers from water and wind. And here's a picture of like some of the outer and inner layers. The most important clothing choice is a daylight fluorescent orange hat and daylight fluorescent orange outerwear, a shirt, vest, or jacket. This orange clothing makes it easier for one hunter to spot and recognize another hunter because nothing in nature matches this color. And it's super important that you can see this orange color from 360. So no matter where I stand around you, I should be able to see that fluorescent orange color. Moving on to page 72 and 73. On page 72, you can see about the different types of maps and compasses, reading a topographic map and selecting a compass. So understanding declination, I don't know if I'm saying that word right, to be honest. A compass, this is just something you need to know that's going to be important. A compass will always point to magnetic north. So to know that. And it tells you about how to figure out how to work a compass and all that on page 72 and 73. Page 74. There are 5 primary requirements for survival. We're talking about survival skills, like what happens if you are put in a situation where you need to just survive, for someone to find you, get lost in the woods or something. So there are 5 primary requirements. 1, preparing a shelter. 2, starting a fire. 3, signaling for help. 4, drinking enough water. And 5, finding food. So preparing shelter, start preparing camp well before dark so that you don't get stuck in the dark. If you can find a natural shelter like an overhanging rock or some thick evergreens, that'll be the best. If no natural shelter is available, you need to pick an area with materials nearby to build a lean-to or debris hut. And then I think I have a picture of like a little lean-to that this person has here. Okay. 2, starting a fire. If there's snow on the ground, build a fire on a platform of green logs or rocks. If the terrain is dry, clear a patch of bare dirt to avoid starting a grass or forest fire. Gather everything you need before you start the fire. I'm so sorry, guys. Oh, okay. 3, signaling for help. The international emergency sign for distress is 3 of anything. Okay, so 3 shots, 3 blasts on a whistle, 3 flashes with a mirror, or 3 fires that are evenly spaced out. 4, drinking enough water. So even in cool weather, you need 2 to 4 quarts of water a day. Under most conditions, humans can only last 3 days without water. 3 days without water. So make sure you're drinking water, even if it's cold outside. And then 5, finding food. Humans can go for 2 weeks or more without food. So the need for food is not that urgent, which is why it's the last on the list. Okay, there are some rules of survival, 8 of them. 1 being, give a responsible person your hunting plan as discussed previously. Don't travel or hunt alone. Take enough food and water to last for several days in an emergency. Bring a map and a compass and always orient yourself before leaving camp. Wear layered clothing and take extra clothing, preferably wool and polyester, with you. Plan your outing so that you can return to camp before dark, and never leave camp without taking fire starting equipment and a full blanket. Don't panic if you become lost. Okay, moving on to page 76. We've talked about hypothermia shortly when we talked about boating, like hunting over water. So hypothermia occurs when your body loses heat faster than it can produce it, causing your core temperature to fall. So prevention of hypothermia. Hypothermia can be prevented by dressing properly, by avoiding potentially dangerous weather conditions, and by drying out as quickly as possible when you get wet. Symptoms of hypothermia are uncontrolled shivering, usually the first sign. But as hypothermia progresses, you won't shiver as much. Slurred speech, memory loss, irrational behavior like removing clothing, lack of body movement, sleepiness, unconsciousness, which is what could lead to death. Treatment of hypothermia is find shelter for the victim, remove wet clothing and replace with dry clothing and other protective covering, give warm liquids to rehydrate, but never give the victim alcohol to drink. For mild cases, use fire, blankets, or another person's body heat to warm the victim. In more advanced stages, rewarm the victim slowly by placing 1 or more persons in body contact with the victim, and place canteens of hot water insulated with socks or towels on the groin, armpits, and sides of the neck of the victim. Frostbite is when tissue freezes, so the best prevention is to avoid severe weather. If you're caught in extremely cold weather, pay attention to your head and extremities like your fingers, toes, ears, and nose, and wear a face cover if the temperature is below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. And then you can read about symptoms and treatment of frostbite on page 77. Page 78, we move on to heat exhaustion. So heat exhaustion is the opposite of hypothermia. It's when the core body temperature increases, usually as a result of hot and humid conditions plus a lack of water. So prevention of heat exhaustion is to drink plenty of water. Make sure that you're hydrated. Take frequent breaks if you're hiking to or from your hunting spot, especially when carrying a large load, and dress in layers. Shed layers as physical activity increases. Then you can read about symptoms and treatment of heat exhaustion and about a heat stroke. Now we're going to move on to page 79 and talk about basic first aid. So bleeding, severe bleeding is a life-threatening medical emergency. I think that's kind of obvious to us, right? The rapid loss of just 2 pints of blood can result in shock and loss of consciousness. And then a victim can bleed to death in a short amount of time. So to stop bleeding, you need to apply direct pressure on the wound, cover with a sterile gauze pad or the cleanest cloth readily available. Concerns about infection are secondary when it comes to preventing massive blood loss, so you'd rather stop the bleeding than worry about infections right away. Press the pad firmly over the wound using the palm of your hand, and don't lift the pad to check the wound. It'll only renew bleeding. When a pad becomes soaked, put a fresh one directly over the old one. Direct pressure and elevation are usually sufficient to stop bleeding. Broken bones, you can assume someone has a broken bone if pain lasts more than a few minutes, moving the injured area is difficult, or there is swelling in the injured area. If you have to transport the victim a long distance, it's best to immobilize the joint above and below the break to prevent further injury and to relieve pain. Don't try to straighten the limb, just splint it the way that you found it. So for a broken foot, do not remove the shoe. Tie a pillow or thick padding around the foot to cover the shoe. To splint a broken leg, place a blanket or other type of thick padding between the legs. Bind the injured leg to the uninjured one with strips of cloth. So you're basically tying it together just like you would if your finger was broken, you would tie it to this finger. Bind the legs together snugly at several places above and below where you think the break is. Then you can read about burns on page 80. You can read about carbon monoxide poisoning, chest wounds, shock, and snake bite. Then for chapter 8, I also have a survival tips video that has a bunch of fun tips about things you can use around you to help you survive. And then you have the chapter worksheet to do right there. Okay, chapter 9 is about wildlife conservation. The concept of wildlife conservation has been around since ancient times. Restrictions on taking game are mentioned in the Bible, and the first official hunting season may have been established in the 13th century. Conservation is the wise use of natural resources without wasting them. Today, wildlife conservation has evolved into a science, but its goal remains essentially the same: to ensure the wise use and management of renewable resources. So preservation, I haven't got there yet. Preservation is another means of protecting or saving a resource, such as outlawing hunting or endangered species. And preservation is defined as saving natural resources, but with no consumptive use of them. Page 82. Initially, wildlife management in the United States was skewed towards protection. In the early 1900s, for example, wildlife managers attempted to preserve a mule deer herd in Arizona. Hunting was banned and predators were destroyed. And then the result of that was severe overpopulation, habitat destruction, and mass starvation. Habitat is defined as complete environmental requirements in an animal to survive. So like food, water, cover, space, and arrangement. But because they were trying to protect this mule deer herd and had no way of controlling the population of it, they had overpopulation. So they had far too many after that, which caused problems. Then you can read about the North American model of wildlife conservation on page 82, and you can see all of that here too. I have everything right there. Habitat management on page 83. On page 84, the resources in any given habitat can support only a certain quantity of wildlife. So as seasons change, food, water, cover may become in short supply. Carrying capacity is the number of animals the habitat can support all year long. So carrying capacity is how, within a year, how many animals can survive in that area. And it can be changed by nature or humans. So factors that limit the potential production of wildlife include disease and parasites, starvation, predators, pollution, accidents, old age, and hunting. The hunter's role in wildlife conservation. Hunting is an effective wildlife management tool, and hunters play an important role by providing the information from the field that wildlife managers need. And funding from hunting licenses has helped many game and non-game species recover from dwindling populations. On page 85, it talks about wildlife management and conservation principles and some practices that you can do to manage wildlife. Those include monitoring wildlife populations, so continuously monitoring the birth rate, so how fast animals are being born, and the death rate, how fast they're dying. Habitat improvement, The change in habitat affects the type and number of wildlife the habitat can support, so wildlife managers may cut down or burn forest area to promote new growth. Hunting regulations protect habit and preserve animal populations. Hunting, it's an effective wildlife management tool, like we've talked about. Predator control, so in rare instances, predators must be reduced to enable some wildlife populations to establish stable populations of that species. Artificial stocking. Restocking of game animals has been successful in many parts of the nation. So, restocking is taking animals in areas where they are abundant and putting them in areas where they need more of that species. Controlling or preventing disease and its spread, and management funds and programs. On page 86, it talks about wildlife identification, and from that point forward, it shows pictures of different types. I put the pictures here, but it's page 86 through the rest of our chapter of different types of wildlife ID. Okay, so wildlife identification. Developing wildlife ID skills is a basic requirement for hunters, and knowing the key characteristics of animals will help you distinguish between similar species and between the male and female of that species. Mistakes in identification can lead to illegal harvest of game or non-game animals, and you don't want to break the law because you don't know what the animal is that you're shooting at. Okay, that's all that we have. So now you have to just do the Chapter 9 workbook, and then you are done with hunter safety except for our test. And we'll take our test on Monday and Tuesday, depending on when you have me. If you are a remote student, which I guess you are if you're watching this video, and you want to get your hunting license, I need to schedule a time for you to come up to the school and take your test, and we can do that when we get back next semester. So just let me know that you're interested in that. I hope you're happy and healthy, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.